Hello, I'm back home again now after my little stay in St Ives, and I've actually got some art materials to show you and a couple of art books which I'd bought inspired by my stay in St Ives. I'll show you the books first of all. At the Airbnb where we were staying, one of the coffee table books was a copy of this book, Painting the Warmth of the Sun by Tom Cross, and it's about the St Ives artists in roughly the period of 1939 to 1975. This is actually a different edition than the one that they had in the house, but I managed to get it secondhand and it was quite cheap. It felt really nice looking at this book while I was actually staying in St Ives. The house where I was just about here. So it talked about the history of St Ives up until those dates. For example, Turner visiting Cornwall in the 1800s. And some of the earlier artists in the later 1800s. And then I was interested to read about Alfred Wallis. I mentioned him in one of my previous videos. And I really like his kind of naive, childlike style. And I'd gone to visit his grave and seen his house after I'd started reading this book a week or two ago. And then that had inspired me to get this book to find out a little bit more about him and to see more of his art. And the book talks about how Alfred Wallis was kind of at the beginning of a movement of less traditional kind of art that was around at the time. And he'd kind of been discovered by Ben Nicholson and one of his friends while they were on holiday there. So I'd also picked up a book on Ben Nicholson. I was interested in his artwork as well. So that's as far as I've got reading at the moment. But I'm looking forwards to actually properly reading the rest of this book. There'll be some about Barbara Hepworth. And it was nice to visit her home and garden while I was in St Ives as well. So that's a Ben Nicholson again. Barbara Hepworth. So yeah, that's one book that I've picked up recently. And funnily enough, I'd gone to the Tate St Ives one day and walked into the main gallery and they were just starting a lecture, which I was invited to join. And it was actually on Alfred Wallis, so I was very excited about that. And then when I went back again another day, they were starting another lecture and it happened to be on Ben Nicholson. So I caught both of those lectures. It was very good timing. So I'll just give you a quick flick through of the Alfred Wallis book. He had no formal education and he didn't start painting till later in his life. But there was a certain looseness and kind of freedom in his work that intrigued other artists who were visiting Cornwall. And he was quite prolific. I think he used to paint on anything and everything that came across his path. So yeah, I think that would be a nice book to read up on. And I'd done this painting last week, kind of inspired by Alfred Wallis's more naive, simplistic style. And I actually sold this painting at my craft market yesterday. And then there's the Ben Nicholson book, his style varies quite a bit over time. This one's actually by Alfred Wallis. So this is one type of his art, very kind of simplistic white reliefs with like geometric designs. But I really like this kind of style of his. This is a painting of his that's in the St Ives Tate gallery at the moment, and I quite enjoyed it. And I had a quick go at my own version of something like that. And I wouldn't say I overly love my outcome, but I did enjoy doing it. It's quite a therapeutic process, just filling in the shapes and layering them a bit. But then I also ordered some things from Jackson's. If you've seen many of my videos, you might know that I've been doing more acrylic painting lately. I've been painting on these kind of 3mm MDF boards. This is one that I did in the last couple of weeks of St Ives Harbour. And so I ordered a couple more acrylics. I just got some titanium white and warm grey, and this is Dale Rowney System 3 acrylic. I think this stuff is pretty comparable to Winsor & Newton's Galleria acrylic paint, and this just happened to be cheaper this time round when I was looking for it, because I've well, I'm scraping the barrel literally on my white. I've got through that the fastest. I also wanted to get the warm grey though, because I'm finding that my palette is quite almost garish sometimes, and I thought I might tone down colours a little bit, make more slightly muted colours by mixing a bit of grey in, because I'm finding that I'm adding white and black to get my achieved look. So I thought I might as well make life a bit easier and experiment with this warm grey. So yeah, some replacement acrylics. And then you might also know that I've been getting more into soft pastels as well. So I'd done this one in the past couple of weeks while I was staying in St Ives. And I actually did a second one very similar, because I decided that I wanted to have one to sell on my craft market this past weekend, but then also have one which I could maybe make prints of if it seemed like it might be popular. And the one on my craft market sold virtually straight away, so I probably will get some prints made. But while I've been doing those, I was finding that I didn't have quite the right colours for the sand. So I've got this Sennelier Plein set, and I was using this one colour a lot. It's kind of getting smaller now. So I decided to get another set of soft pastels that have got more sandy colours in. A while back I'd bought this Unison set of pastels in the greys. It was the grey set 1 to 18, because I hadn't got enough of the right kind of greys for doing skies. And this set's been brilliant. I've used it quite a bit in the last couple of soft pastel paintings that I've done. So what I went with was the next set of greys, the 19 to 36 set. I'll show you these colours. Oh yeah, great. They're quite similar to each other, but there's a lot more of these muted yellows, which will be good for the sand, plus some really lovely greeny blue colours. I'll just show you the two grey sets next to each other. So yeah, that's grey number 1 all the way through to grey number 36. And I think even on their own, they make a really nice landscape kind of set. I've been using the Sennelier and Unison soft pastels pretty interchangeably, and I really do like both of those brands. They're very soft, though not quite as soft as the Schmincke soft pastels, which I find to be more crumbly and kind of moister in some way. For me personally, and it is a very subjective decision, I personally like the Senneliers and Unison the best. Though I do like these Prismacolour NuPastels, and also the Rembrandts as harder pastels for adding like finer details. And then I also have this little box from Jackson's, and I've got a couple of paints in it. So I've got another acrylic. This is the Golden Fluid Acrylics in Carbon Black, and then the others are watercolours. So I've got Schmincke Horadam's Ice Blue. I've got one of the new Holbein Granulating watercolours. They've brought out a set of, I think it's 36, I'll correct it on screen if I'm wrong, granulating watercolour paints. And I'd seen them swatched out in a couple of places, and I thought they were quite interesting, but I wasn't totally blown away by them. Though there was this one colour that I really quite liked and wanted to try out, and that's Eurasian J, and it's a rose grey. And then while the Roman Szmal watercolour sale was on at Jackson's, I picked up one which is, it's a PV14, and it's Cobalt Violet Deep. I've got a Cobalt Violet from Schmincke, but it's nearly run out now, so I thought I'd give this one a go. I've been using it for shadows on beaches mainly, so I'm going to enjoy swatching these out. And then one last watercolour is a Mijello Mission Gold Blue Grey. I picked up both of these blues really as alternative sky colours. I've used Verdita for a long time for my favourite sky colour, but I fancy trying out some different colours now, and yeah, these two appealed to me. This Schmincke one's a limited edition, but I think it's been around for a while. So yeah, I thought I'd try those anyway. Then also last week I'd ordered a couple of new paintbrushes for use with acrylics. I think I might have mentioned these in my last video, but I wanted some that were a little bit softer than the acrylic brushes that I've been using. So for detailed stuff, I've mainly been using Rosemary & Co. either Evergreen or Ivory brushes. And I think these are Da Vinci Fort Basic brushes. They're very cheap, but I've done a couple of paintings with them now, and I've quite liked them actually. They've been quite nice to use. And then I also wanted to try out a Princeton Select brush. I've not tried any from this range of Princeton before, and yeah, I just thought I'd try those. I'll swatch out my paints now. The reason I got the Carbon Black in fluid acrylic is that I've been using heavy body acrylics, but the style I've been doing is to have like a black outline first, which partially gets covered over when you do the rest of the painting. So like you can see it here as well, but it was quite hard to do that with the heavy body paints. And so I thought I might try it with the fluid acrylics and see if I got kind of better coverage. I'll just take the lid off. Yeah, I just I thought that the fluid acrylics might flow a little bit better when I'm doing lines. Yeah, I think that's going to be good. So with my black heavier body acrylics, you have to water it down a bit, but then it's still kind of, it's more of a kind of a splodgy lay down. I'll just put a bit of water on it. To get it runny enough, you lose some of the opacity. Yeah, so I'll be able to be a bit less clumsy with this black, the fluid acrylic. And then let's try out these watercolours. I know these are likely to be more opaque because I think they've got white mixed in them. The ice white is PW6 and PB15:1. Which is completely easy to mix up yourself, but I like speed and convenience colours. That's really nice, delicate blue. Yeah, I do like that. I'll get out my swatch folder in a minute and compare this with some of my other blues. And then I've got this Mission Gold and Blue Grey. And this is PB28, PW6 and PB15:3. Ooh, that's quite a bit brighter than I was expecting. I think that's separated slightly, and I've got a larger dose of binder in this. But it gives an idea of the colour anyway. That's quite a nice colour though. I wouldn't have called it blue-grey. I think the grey in it is a little bit misleading. And then we'll take a look at this Eurasian J Rose. Let's see what the pigments are. So it's PB29, PG18 and PO73. So out of the tube it's this nice a dark purpley colour that reminds me a bit of a Gallows Notturno. And then the last watercolour, the Cobalt Violet Deep. Now I'm assuming that this is not a strong tinting paint and that it's one that's harder to re-wet. So I'll give it a little bit of extra time. Oh, actually that's not too bad. That's really pretty. I'll just pull out my swatch folder now and do a couple of comparisons. So I've got this big Lictin trading card folder with all of my professional watercolour paints swatched out like this in it. So I'll just show you some of my other kind of light blues, though they're all quite different. So that's Sennelier's Royal Blue. That's Holbein's Verditer, that's a lot more purpley. That's Gale's Lapis Lazuli. I wondered how close Issaro's Eternal Summit would be to this ice blue. And it's like the same kind of paint, but this is the blue version and this is the green version. Sorry, I meant to have pulled out Verditer and I pulled out the lavender. No wonder it was so much more purple. This is Holbein's Verditer. And then this Eurasian J is mostly dried now. That's quite a pretty paint, though it's dried with a lot more of the red showing through than Naturno does. So this is Naturno. And then this is Schmincke's Tundra Pink. It reminds me a little bit of it. It's like a darker version of Tundra Pink. And I don't really have anything else that similar to it. For anyone who's curious about Daniel Smith's Moonglow, you can see that that's a lot greener. And then for the Cobalt Violet Deep, and this is the Schmincke Cobalt Violet, which I've been using and really liking. So the Roman Szmal one is a little bit warmer than the Schmincke one, but it's still along the same lines and got the same kind of delicacy that I like, so I'm really happy with that. And the only PV14, which is the same pigment as this, that I've got is Winsor & Newton's Cobalt Violet, which is very different, much more pinky. I just thought one thing it might be fun to do is seeing if I can mix up my own version of Holbein's Eurasian J. So it was a mixture of PB29, ultramarine blue. So I've got a bit of Daniel Smith's French ultramarine. And then PG18, is that Viridian? I've only got one PG18 and that's Quartz Viridian. I guess you've got the green in it and the orange that's to come, mixing up this browny colour. And then PO73. So for that I'll use Winsor & Newton's orange red shade. Wow, I didn't think it was going to get to that so quickly. Right, let's just test that out. That's actually not bad. I'll just paint some out the tube again, see what it's like when it first lays down. I think this might be a little bit more purpley when it first laid down. Yeah, probably want a little bit more blue. I'm just putting some more ultramarine in there. I think that's gone a bit too blue now. Right, I'll just let those dry a bit and we'll compare them. Just while I'm talking about granulating paints, I filmed a little snippet the other night to show you a comparison of how they operate differently, or how granulating paints operate differently on different papers. These were little paintings I'd done then with mainly granulating watercolours, and this first page was done on Canson XL watercolour paper, which is a cellulose paper. And I really love how this paper brings out the granulation. There's just loads of texture and I really like the details it gives in these little landscapes. This second page is Bao Hung Artist Quality Cold Pressed 100% cotton watercolour paper, and I find that cotton papers don't bring out the granulation as much. I added some gold paint to lend a bit of interest to these ones. You can see the two papers side by side here. I think it's useful to understand the properties of different papers so that you can play to their strengths. And while they're drying a bit more, I'll just finally show you this last lovely little thing. It's a paintbrush holder from my old university friend Rebecca, and she sent me this gift. And it's so pretty. See the little birds on it. So that was a really lovely, thoughtful gift from her. So I'll just show you these up close now. This isn't completely dry, so it'll probably granulate a bit more. But you can see it's not a million miles off the original Eurasian J. So if you are super interested in granulating paints, you don't necessarily need to rush out and buy them. You might be able to mix them up from paints that you already have. I've experimented a fair bit with mixing granulating paints now, which are multi-pigment granulating paints, that is. And I've had mixed success. Some have turned out really well and been really good substitutes, and others haven't gone very well. And I'm just glad I have them in the pre-mixed forms. I'll link to a video down below where I have a go at mixing quite a few granulating paints. So that's my little art haul anyway. I hope you enjoyed seeing it. Thanks ever so much for joining me as always. Bye!